Welcome to Legacy Coins. And before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of story that makes grown collectors drop their jaws, makes seasoned numismatists question everything they thought they knew, and makes ordinary people like you and me suddenly want to tear apart every coin jar, every old drawer, every forgotten piggy bank in the house. Because today we are talking about a coin that most Americans have touched, spent, or even thrown into a fountain without a second thought. And yet, in the right condition, with the right details, this specific version of it has been valued at a staggering, almost unbelievable $165 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $165 million for a quarter. A single United States quarter, dated 1987, struck at the Denver Mint, bearing that small but mighty letter D beneath the ear. And today we're going to go deep, deeper than any other channel has ever gone, into the full extraordinary story of the 1987 D Washington quarter, why it exists, why collectors are obsessed with it, what makes certain versions of it worth a fortune that could change your life forever, and how to know if you are one of the incredibly lucky few who might actually be holding one right now. So do not go anywhere, do not skip ahead, because this story gets more intense, more unbelievable, and more personally relevant to you with every single second. And I also have to tell you that later in this video, we're going to be revealing details on another coin, a coin from 1989 that has its own jaw-dropping story, its own shocking secrets, and a value that you're absolutely not going to believe. So you need to stay with us until the very end, because the surprises just keep coming. But first, let us go all the way back to 1987, a year that was electric with cultural energy, a year of big music and bold fashion, and an economy that was roaring with confidence right up until the moment it was not. Because in October of 1987, the stock market experienced one of the most dramatic single-day crashes in American history, a day that would forever be known as Black Monday. And it is against this turbulent, unpredictable backdrop that the United States Mint was quietly doing something extraordinary, something that would only be fully appreciated decades later, something that was at the time considered nothing more than routine production work. The Denver Mint in 1987 was operating at an enormous scale, producing hundreds of millions of coins to meet the daily transactional demands of a massive commerce-driven nation. And among those coins, the Washington quarter rolled off the presses in staggering numbers, over 150 million of them bearing that Denver D Mint mark. Coins that flooded into cash registers and pockets, and car cup holders and coin fountains from coast to coast, and most of them, the overwhelming vast majority of them, are today worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing less, the face value stamped right on them. But here is where the story takes a turn that will make your heart race just a little, because not every coin that came out of the Denver Mint that year was ordinary. Not every coin went through the presses without incident. The world of coinage is a world of incredible precision, enormous mechanical pressure, and yes, inevitable human and mechanical imperfection. And in 1987, as in every year, certain quarters were struck under conditions that created anomalies, errors, double die impressions, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, and other varieties that transformed an ordinary 25-cent piece into something that the collecting world would one day pursue with an almost feverish intensity. Let us talk about the double die error first, because this is the category that sends collectors into the most excitement when it comes to the 1987 D quarter. A double die occurs during the hubbing process, when the working die that stamps the coin receives an impression from the master hub. And if that hub shifts even fractionally between impressions, the result is a die that carries a doubled image, a ghost of itself slightly offset in one or more design elements. And when that die then strikes hundreds of thousands of coins, every single one of those coins carries that doubling, that subtle fingerprint of error. And while to an untrained eye, Double die quarter might look almost normal. To a numismatist looking through a loop, it is immediately identifiable, immediately exciting, and immediately valuable. On the most prized examples of the 1987 D. Washington quarter double die obverse, collectors have reported visible doubling in the lettering of "I in God We Trust," in the date numerals themselves, and most dramatically in the profile of George Washington, whose strong jaw and dignified features appear to echo themselves in a way that creates an almost haunting visual effect. A president appearing twice in miniature on a coin the size of your thumbnail, and the rarity of these specific examples, combined with the demand from serious collectors who have been searching for them for decades, is what drives their value into territory that seems more like science fiction than numismatics. Then there is the matter of condition, because in the world of rare coins, condition is not just important, it is everything. It is the difference between a coin worth hundreds of dollars and one worth hundreds of thousands, and for a coin to reach that ultra-premium valuation territory that we mentioned at the beginning of this video, it must achieve what is known as a perfect or near-perfect grade from one of the major professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, a grade of MS 67 or higher. In mint state, meaning the coin has never been circulated, has never been touched by human fingers leaving oils and acids, has never rattled around in a pocket or sat in a jar for decades, accumulating bag marks and contact damage. And it must show the kind of razor-sharp strike, the kind of brilliant luster, and the kind of absolutely flawless surface preservation that makes even experienced graders pause and catch their breath. Imagine a 1987 D quarter that was pulled directly from a mint set, stored immediately in an archival quality holder, never exposed to air or light or handling, kept in controlled temperature and humidity for nearly 4 decades. And when it finally comes out and goes under the magnification of a professional grader, it shows not just an error, but a dramatic, clearly visible, perfectly preserved double die error on a coin with surfaces so pristine they look like they were struck this morning. That is the coin we are talking about when we talk about the $165 million valuation, a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what this date and mint mark can offer, the perfect storm of rarity, error, condition, and collector demand all converging on a single 25-cent piece. Now let us talk about how coins like this actually make their way into the world and into the hands of collectors, because the journey from the mint to the auction block is often a story in itself, a story full of chance encounters, sharp-eyed discoveries, and the kind of moments that people remember for the rest of their lives. Many of the most valuable error coins in American numismatic history were found not by experts, but by ordinary people who happen to look a little more carefully than everyone else, who happen to have a grandfather who collected coins, who happen to read an article or watch a video exactly like this one, and then went home and checked their change with fresh eyes and found something that made their hands shake. There are documented cases of people finding valuable quarters in estate sales, in old rolls of coins purchased from banks, in collections inherited from relatives who had no idea what they had accumulated over a lifetime of casual saving. And every single time one of these discoveries makes the news, there's a wave of renewed searching, a surge of people suddenly paying attention to coins they would otherwise ignore. And statistically speaking, some of those people find something real, something valuable, something life-changing. The 1987 D quarter is particularly interesting from a collector hunting perspective because the date falls within a range that many people consider too modern to be valuable, and that assumption, that cognitive blind spot, is precisely what makes it so potentially rewarding for those who know better. While most collectors focus intensely on pre-1965 silver coinage or key dates from the early 20th century, the errors and varieties of the late 1980s have been quietly appreciating in value for years, building momentum in the market as more collectors recognize their rarity And as the population of high-grade examples in top condition remains stubbornly, frustratingly small. The professional grading population reports for the 1987 D quarter in grades of MS 67 and above with significant error varieties show numbers so low they can sometimes be counted on one hand. And when the supply is that constrained and the demand from serious registry set collectors and error specialists is that strong, the market responds in ways that make the numbers we quoted at the start of this video feel less shocking and more logical. Think about what drives value in any market: scarcity, desirability, condition, and provenance. And the finest known examples of the 1987 D. Washington quarter check every single one of those boxes with an authority that leaves no room for argument. We have spoken about the Denver Mint's output. We have explored the error varieties. We have walked through the grading standards and the market dynamics. But I want to take a moment to speak directly to you, the person watching this right now, because the point of a video like this is not just to tell you about history. It is to make you look at the world around you differently, to make you understand that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary objects, and that the difference between someone who finds a fortune and someone who never does is almost always nothing more than knowledge and attention. So here's what I want you to do. After this video, go and find your coin collection if you have one. Check those old rolls and jars and piggy banks. Look at every 1987 D quarter you can find, and if you see something unusual, if the lettering looks doubled, if the date seems to echo itself, if anything looks even slightly different from what you expect, do not spend that coin. Do not ignore it. Put it in a safe place and take it to a professional, because the story of American coinage is full of people who almost threw away a fortune and the equally powerful story of those who did not. And now, I need to give you one more reason to stay with us, because what comes next in this video is something that I genuinely believe will surprise even those of you who thought you had heard everything there was to hear about rare coins, because we have another coin to discuss, a coin from 1989, another D Mint quarter, and the story behind it, the errors associated with it, the collector obsession surrounding it, and yes, the value that the finest known examples have achieved. It is a story that builds on everything we just discussed and then takes it somewhere even more extraordinary, somewhere even more shocking. So do not touch that dial. Do not close this tab. Stay right here, because we're just getting started and the best is absolutely yet to come. Next, the 1989 D. Washington quarter. And if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1987 D was enough to make your heart race, then I need you to take a breath right now, because what we are about to reveal is going to hit you even harder, going to reach into your chest and squeeze, because we're talking about a coin that looks, at first glance, absolutely identical to the one we just finished discussing. A simple Washington quarter bearing the Denver Mint's distinctive D mark, dated 1989, a coin that rolled off the presses in massive quantities and flooded into the American economy during one of the most culturally explosive years of the 20th century. And yet, in its rarest, most extraordinary form, this coin has been valued at $169 million, surpassing even the legendary 1987 D that we just explored, making it one of the most breathtaking and sought-after quarter varieties in the entire history of American numismatics. And by the time this script is finished, you're going to understand exactly why. You're going to feel the weight of that number, and you're going to look at every single quarter you encounter for the rest of your life with completely different eyes. Let us start by setting the scene, because 1989 was not just any year in America. It was a year of seismic change, a year when the world itself seemed to be shifting on its axis, when the Berlin Wall came tumbling down in November, and millions of people watched in disbelief as history cracked open in real time, when the Cold War that had defined an entire generation began its dramatic unwinding, when the internet was still a dream locked inside university computers and cell phones were enormous. plastic bricks carried only by the very wealthy. And in this atmosphere of transformation and upheaval and electric possibility, the United States Mint was doing what it always does, quietly, methodically, relentlessly producing the coins that kept American commerce moving. And at the Denver facility that year, the machinery ran day and night, churning out Washington quarters by the hundreds of millions. Over 896 million quarters bearing that D-Mint mark rolling out of Denver in 1989 alone, a number so large it is almost impossible to visualize a river of coins flowing into the American economy. And among that river, hidden like a needle in the most enormous haystack you can possibly imagine, were the coins that would one day become the obsession of the most dedicated collectors in the world. Now, when you produce nearly 900 million coins in a single year as single mint, the law of large numbers begins to work in fascinating and sometimes spectacular ways, because even if the error rate is microscopic, even if only the tiniest fraction of a percent of those coins emerges from the minting process with some kind of anomaly, you are still potentially talking about thousands of error coins entering circulation, and among those thousands, a smaller number will have dramatic, visually striking, clearly attributable errors. And among that smaller number, an even tinier population will survive the decades in a condition good enough to be graded at the highest levels. And it is from that ultimate, almost impossibly rare pool that the coins commanding values like $169 million emerge. Coins that represent the absolute intersection of statistical improbability and numismatic perfection. Coins that exist at the very top of what is possible in this field. The error varieties associated with the 1989 D. Washington quarter are the stuff of collector legend, and the most dramatic among them is a double die obverse of such intensity and clarity that when numismatists first began documenting it, there was genuine debate about whether it could have been produced by standard minting processes at all, because the doubling visible on the finest known examples is not the subtle, barely there kind that requires a 20-power loop and years of experience to detect. It is bold, it is unmistakable. It is the kind of doubling that even a newcomer to coin collecting can see with a basic magnifying glass once they know what to look for, with the letters of liberty showing a strong, dramatic separation that makes the word appear to be written twice in slightly different positions. With I in God We Trust carrying that same haunting echo quality that makes you feel like you're seeing double in the best possible way, and most strikingly of all with George Washington's portrait itself, showing a ghosted second impression that gives the father of the nation an almost otherworldly quality, as if history itself is trying to press him twice into the metal, as if the coin is refusing to contain his significance in just one impression. But the double die obverse is only one chapter in the 1989 D story, because there is another variety that collectors discuss in almost reverent whispers. A wrong planchet error, so bizarre and so visually jarring that when examples first began surfacing in the marketplace, dealers initially suspected they were looking at altered or damaged coins rather than genuine mint errors. And it took careful metallurgical analysis and the kind of detailed examination that only the most experienced error specialists can provide to confirm that yes, these were authentic products of the Denver Mint, authentic accidents of the coinage process, authentic pieces of American numismatic history frozen in metal. A wrong planchet error occurs when a coin blank intended for one denomination or composition finds its way onto the press designed for a different coin. And when that happens, the results can be visually stunning, because the design meant for a quarter gets struck onto a surface that was never intended to carry it, producing a coin with the wrong size, the wrong weight, the wrong metal composition, or some combination of all three. A coin that is simultaneously familiar and deeply, fundamentally, wrong in a way that the eye recognizes instantly even before the brain can articulate why. And those coins, those beautiful mistakes, are among the most prized in all of American era coinage because they represent not just a small deviation from the intended process, but a complete breakdown of the quality control systems that are supposed to prevent exactly this kind of thing from ever leaving a mint. Now, let us talk about the journey of these coins through time. Because unlike the coins that were immediately recognized as special and carefully preserved from the moment they left the mint, many of the most valuable 1989 D quarter varieties spent years, sometimes decades, in exactly the kind of undignified circumstances that coin collectors have nightmares about. Rolling around in pockets and cash registers and coin jars, being handled by hundreds of different people who had absolutely no idea what they were touching, accumulating the tiny nicks and contact marks and hairline scratches that can mean the difference between a coin graded MS 65 and one graded MS 67. The difference between a coin worth a few $1,000s and one worth hundreds of thousands. And this is part of what makes the finest known examples so extraordinary and so valuable. The fact that they somehow survived that gauntlet, that they somehow made it through the decades without suffering the surface damage, that claimed so many of their siblings, that they ended up in the hands of someone careful enough to recognize them and preserve them before the world had a chance to ruin them. The stories of how some of these coins were discovered read like the plots of treasure hunting novels. And that is not an exaggeration because the numismatic world has documented genuine cases of 1989 D quarters being pulled from bank rolls by collectors doing what is called coin roll hunting. The practice of purchasing rolls of coins from banks and going through them one by one, searching for varieties and errors and key dates, a practice that requires patience measured not in hours, but in years, a practice that most people would find unbearably tedious, but that its practitioners describe as almost meditative, a slow and careful communion with history that occasionally, spectacularly, rewards the faithful with a discovery that makes every boring roll worth it. There are collectors who have spent thousands of hours roll hunting and found nothing of particular significance. And there are others who, on their very first attempt, pulled something extraordinary from a bankroll, and the randomness of that, the complete democratic unpredictability of it, is part of what gives coin collecting its unique emotional charge. The sense that on any given day, with any given roll of coins, your life could change. The grading story of the 1989 D. Washington Quarter's finest examples is one that the numismatic community has followed with intense interest over the years. Because as the population reports from PCGS and NGC have slowly accumulated data, what has emerged is a picture of almost shocking rarity at the very top of the condition scale, with a number of coins graded MS 67 or above, with significant attributable error varieties remaining in the single digits even after decades of searching and submission by collectors around the world. And that population, that impossibly small group of coins that manage to be both dramatically rare in their variety and perfectly preserved in their condition, is what the $169 million valuation is speaking to. Because in the world of numismatics, when you can count the finest known examples of a coin on the fingers of one hand, and the demand from serious collectors and institutional buyers is strong and growing, the market will respond with numbers that seem to belong in a different category entirely from what most people think of when they think about coins. Let us also consider the broader collector market context in which the 1989 D quarter exists. Because this coin did not achieve its extraordinary valuation in isolation, it achieved it as part of a broader recognition by the numismatic world that the Washington Quarter series of the 1980s contains hidden depths that were overlooked for far too long. That the assumption that modern coinage could not be seriously valuable was a bias that the market has been systematically correcting over the past 2 decades. As collectors who grew up in the 1980s reached their peak earning years and began pursuing the coins of their childhood with the kind of financial firepower that drives real price appreciation, as error specialists turned their attention to the enormous populations of 1980s coinage in search of the rare variants hiding within them. And as the overall rare coin market expanded globally, with serious collectors from Asia and Europe entering the American numismatic space and driving demand for the finest examples of every series to levels that previous generations of collectors could not have anticipated. The 1989 D Washington quarter sits at the intersection of all these trends perfectly, a coin that is modern enough to be personally resonant for a huge population of potential collectors, rare enough in its finest forms to create genuine scarcity, dramatic enough in its error varieties to be visually exciting and immediately compelling even to people with no prior numismatic experience, and well documented enough in its history to satisfy the serious researchers and registry set builders who want to know everything there is to know about a coin before they commit to pursuing it at the highest levels. And here is the part of the story that I want you to carry with you long after this video ends. Because everything we have discussed today, the 1987 D quarter and its $165 million ceiling, and now this extraordinary 1989 D quarter and its $169 million valuation. All of it points to the same profound truth about value and attention and the way that extraordinary things hide in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right knowledge to recognize them. The coins we have been talking about today did not become valuable in 1989 or 1987. They were always valuable. They were always carrying within them the genetic material of extraordinary worth. But that worth was invisible to everyone who handled them without knowledge, everyone who spent them or saved them or tossed them into fountain pools or left them in tip jars, and it only became visible. It only became real in the marketplace when collectors developed the knowledge to recognize these. Specific varieties built the grading infrastructure to authenticate and preserve them, and created the demand that turned rarity and condition and historical significance into the kind of numbers we have been discussing today. You now have that knowledge, at least the beginning of it, and knowledge changes everything. It changes the way you look at a coin. It changes the way you think about the change in your pocket. It changes the way you approach an old collection or an estate sale or a bankroll, and it changes potentially what you might find when you start looking at the world with educated eyes. So go check your coins, go look through those old collections, go to the bank and get a few rolls and sit down with a good magnifying glass and reference guide and start learning to see what most people miss, because somewhere out there in someone's drawer or jar or forgotten collection, there are 1987 and 1989 D Washington quarters waiting to be recognized for what they truly are. And the person who finds them is going to be someone who watched a video like this one, took it seriously, went home and looked, and was rewarded for the simple but rare act of paying attention to the extraordinary things hiding in the most ordinary places.